Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. You are now listening to the right side. I am your host, Jeff Doggett, coming to you on the greatest station in the nation, from the greatest location in the nation. Just want to give greetings to all of you that are listening to us as far north as Kennebunkport, Maine, as far south as Key West, Florida, as far east as Staten Island, New York, and as far west as Stockton, California. And also hello to all of you that are listening to us and all the points in between. For those of you that are listening to us around the world, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever greeting best suits the time zone that you are in. There are several things that you can do to prevent the spread of respiratory diseases like COVID-19. Number one, wash your hands with warm soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Now, if you don't know what 20 seconds are, just sing happy birthday to yourself. And when you've completed that song, you've completed 20 seconds. Number two, cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Yes, I know that sounds like common sense, but sadly, one of the least common things around is common sense. So please cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Number three, wipe down frequently touched objects and items with some type of sanitizer. And oh, by the way, you might want to mix in some type of hand sanitizer in your vehicle so that when you go to the gas station and pump gas, after using that pump, since you do not know who handled that pump prior to you handling it, you can sanitize your hands. Also, stay at home when you are sick and stay away from people who are sick. That job, that event, or whatever it is that you think can't go on without you, will go on without you. So please stay at home when you're sick and stay away from people who are sick. And if you're in a crowded area like a shopping mall, a movie theater, or a playhouse, or a sports arena, or church, or store, wherever it may be, please continue to wear your mask. And if at all possible, continue also to keep your six feet distance from other people. This, folks, is not over. In fact, it has morphed from a pandemic to an endemic, meaning that it's going to be around with us, at least for the foreseeable future. But you can do your part and play your part in stop spreading this disease around. And this was brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise, powered by Google and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines. Now, if you are in the Cleveland area on the first or third Saturday of the month, I've got some outstanding news for you. At 6812 Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., they are giving away a free bag of groceries. That's right, free is that in that you don't pay, free in that it doesn't cost anything, free in that it's zero money out of your pocket. I don't know how much more stringently I can define the word free than other than how I've done it already. And you may be asking yourself, okay, Jeff, I hear you, but what is it do I have to do? Do I have to do to qualify? Do I have to live in the Cleveland area? No. Do I have to live in Ohio? No. The only thing that you have to qualify is that you have to be a living, breathing human being that is able to come to pick up the free bag of groceries. But not only do you get a free bag of groceries, you also get free clothing. Not just for you, but for children as well. No, so no, stop. Wait a minute. Hold it. You mean to tell me that I get a free bag of groceries? Yes. And free clothing for both myself and children? Yes. Wow. That's great, but you know what? I'm not finished yet. Because if you're there between the hours of 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., you get a free hot lunch. That's right, a free hot lunch, home-cooked meal that will be yummy to your tummy and dispels the notion that there's no such thing as a free lunch. So let me just go over it again. You get a free bag of groceries. You get free clothing for both yourself and children, and you get a free hot lunch if you're there during the time it's being served. When do you say this is again? It is the first and third Saturday of each month. Where is it, you ask? It is at 6812 Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. And we want to commend the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, We Care Ministries, and also Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, who houses this event each first and third Saturday of the month. For those of you that are new to this program, this is what we do on this show. We talk politics, we talk sports, we talk the issues of the day. I put topics out on the table. I give my take on those topics, and then we invite you to call in at 216-939-5087. 216-939-5087. Now listen. I can go ahead and talk for the whole hour, but the show is much more engaging and entertaining when you call in with your thoughts. We do welcome your thoughts and your calls on these subjects, and guess what? You don't even have to agree with me. You would be wrong. No, just kidding. You don't have to agree, and matter of fact, that makes for spirited debate. So today in our first hour, this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Lamar Jackson and the hypocrisy of the National Football League. We have some thoughts on the whole Lamar Jackson situation and what's going on with him right now. Then we are going to talk about the Trump indictment and how it exposes the what I call the cult 45, or the cult of Trump. And we're going to look at that in our first hour. And then we have open forum too as well. So if there's something that you want to talk about that I didn't put out on the table, please feel free to call us at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. You know, the trophy that is given to the team that wins the Super Bowl in the National Football League is called the Lombardi Trophy. Now, for those of you who do not know who that trophy is named after iconic and legendary Packers coach Vince Lombardi, who was the coach of the Green Bay Packers in the late 50s and throughout the 60s, and had a dynasty there with his Green Bay teams, winning 3 championships during that time period. And so his teams won the first 2 Super Bowls. They weren't called the Super Bowl at that time. It was called the championship game, the AFL NFL championship game, as there were 2 leagues at that time. And then, oh, by the way, let me just say this, to put this in, just to get some historical clarity here. The Super Bowl is the NFL championship. That's what it is. Guess what, folks? The NFL championship just didn't start in 1967 when you had the first Super Bowl. The NFL championship has been around since the beginning of the NFL. And the modern era of the National Football League started in 1950. Why are you saying all this, Jeff? Because there are a lot of people out here today that are listening to us that think that only the Super Bowl era counts and nothing before that does count. Well, you're dead wrong. In fact, I bet you probably think that the New England Patriots have the most NFL championships, and that's nowhere near the case. The franchise that has the most NFL championships are the Green Bay Packers. That's why they call it Title Town. But I digress. So, this trophy is named after legendary and iconic Packer coach Vince Lombardi. And you may be asking yourself, well, Jeff, why are you bringing up the name of Vince Lombardi right now? Well, that's a good question. I'm going to answer that for you right now. Vince Lombardi once said that winning isn't everything. He said winning isn't everything. Winning is the only thing. Okay, so let that sink in for a minute so you can see the difference. Because the prevailing thought at the time was that winning was everything. Vince Lombardi said, no, it's not everything. It's the only thing. In other words, it's exclusive. It's all that counts. And I bring that up for this reason. Because that mantra, if you will, was adapted and adopted by most, if not all, franchises in the National Football League. Al Davis, the late owner of the Oakland Raiders, took it to another level when he just coined the phrase, just win, baby. So the NFL franchises, all 32 of them, will tell you, you being the fan, being their fan base in the various cities across the country, and then fans of that team that don't live in that area, they will tell you at the beginning of each season that we are dedicated to winning. We are dedicated to bringing a championship to fill in the blank city. That is the goal of our organization. That's why we draft. That's why we sign players that we sign in free agency. This is why we hire the coaching staffs that we hire. This is why we hire the GMs, et cetera, because we are dedicated to winning. Because we believe what Vince Lombardi once said, that winning is not everything, winning is the only thing. So we want you as our fan base of fill in the blank team to buy into this philosophy, to buy into the fact that all we really care about is winning, right? That's what they will tell you. Here's the hypocrisy in it. And this hypocrisy is being exposed right now. The most important position in the NFL is the position of quarterback. Teams desperately that don't have the quote franchise unquote quarterback are desperately seeking to get that player, either through trades, through the draft, free agency, which those type quarterbacks very rarely, if ever, come available in free agency. They're doing whatever they can do to get them. The prime example of this is look at all the assets that the Carolina Panthers gave up to move up to the Bears to move up to the #1 spot in this year's draft. And it's being debated back and forth, who are they going to draft, quarterback Bryce Young out of Alabama or quarterback C.J. Stroud out of The Ohio State University. But you've noticed that no other player or no other position has been mentioned. And it's a foregone conclusion that one of those two young men is going to hear their name called before anybody else on April 27th when the draft begins. So the most important position on the team in an organization that's part of a league that says that winning is not everything, it's the only thing, that says that our organization is determined and dedicated to bring a winning team to this fill-in-the-blank city, to this fill-in-the-blank fan base. It's a lie, folks. And I'm going to expose the lie for you right now. There is a quarterback by the name of Lamar Jackson. Now, if you don't follow the NFL, Lamar Jackson is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the National Football League. Lamar Jackson's contract with the Baltimore Ravens was up at the end of last season. They spent last season trying to negotiate a new contract with him to keep him there. Mind you, just to throw at this end, to give you the whole picture, Lamar Jackson is a former MVP of the league. So we're not talking about some run-of-the-mill or a little above average to, maybe, yeah, he's pretty good. We're talking about an elite level player here. Mm-hmm. All right? He is an elite level player, as I said, former MVP, mentioned in the same breath with the Mahomes and the Allens and the Burrows, etc. of the league. Those of you who don't know, those are top quarterbacks in the National Football League. So you would think, given the fact that quarterback is the most important position in this league, the fact that the teams that have the quote franchise unquote quarterback are doing everything they can do to keep them, and those who don't have one are trying their best to get one, you would think that the Ravens would want to do everything possible to keep him. Well, in the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friends. Because the Ravens are not doing everything in their power to keep him. You ask, well, what's the problem? What's the sticking point, Jeff? Where's the sticking point at? The sticking point is this, that Lamar Jackson, and I don't believe it's about the money, okay, because I believe they'll pay him the money. The sticking point is this, is that Lamar Jackson wants a guaranteed contract. Now, for those of you that are unaware and don't know, NFL players do not have guaranteed contracts like NBA and MLB players. Given the fact that their sport is the most violent of the three major sports, given the fact also that their careers last a lot shorter than MLB or NBA players. The average NFL player's career lasts about 4.5 years. All right? So, but they don't have guaranteed contracts, with the exception of one player. And I'll give you a guess as to what position that player plays. And your first two guesses don't count. The only player in the National Football League as of today, as of March 25th, 2023, the only player in the National Football League that has a guaranteed contract is one Deshaun Watson of the Cleveland Browns, who signed his guaranteed deal last year, a 5-year deal for $258 million, fully guaranteed. Now, for those of you that are novices or you may be new to it all, you're just a casual fan of the league, you may ask yourself, well, what's the problem here? Why won't the Ravens give Lamar Jackson a guaranteed contract? The reason for that is twofold. Number one, the owners are proving what they really are about, and this is about power and control. They do not want to give players guaranteed contracts because that loses power and control that they have. And number two, they are upset at the Browns ownership for breaking ranks, if you will, by giving Deshaun Watson something that none of them are willing to do to any other player. And you hear the arguments, well, we can't give players guaranteed contracts because that's going to mess up the financial structure of the league. Folks, that's a lot of garbage, all right? Because there are only, and players know this too, there are only a small percentage of, and certain position player is that's going to get a fully guaranteed contract, and that small percentage and that certain position are franchise quarterbacks. Outstanding wideouts, the Jamar Chases and the Justin Jeffersons of the world, they're not getting guaranteed contracts. I don't care how good they are. Tyreek Hill, not getting a guaranteed contract. Because you can find those type of receivers and you don't have to tank your season to get one. All right? Offensive linemen, as valued as they are, because they are the ones who protect these franchise quarterbacks, they're not getting guaranteed deals either. They'll get, and wide receivers will get handsomely compensated, especially at the level of the guys that I mentioned. Offensive linemen, Laramie Tunstall, for example, just proved this the other day with the Houston Texans, is the highest paid offensive lineman in the league. So, but his contract is not guaranteed. So, offensive linemen aren't getting those contracts. Certainly, running backs aren't. With the devaluation of the running back position in the NFL today, they're not going to get those type of contracts. So let's flip over to the other side. Tight ends neither. So let's flip over to the other side of the ball. What about, since there's such an emphasis on passing these days, what about premier defensive linemen, rush ends and tackles, and then also your cover corners? What about them? Handsomely paid? Yes. Nice contracts? Yes. Aaron Donald for one, Myles Garrett for another. Guaranteed? No. They're not going to get guaranteed deals. Not now, not next week, not ever. Because again, as important as that position is, you can find those guys where you do not have to put the same type of income and resource into that position. See, if you draft the wrong quarterback, that sets your franchise back about 5 years. If you draft the wrong edge rusher, It'll hurt, yes, but you can make that up either in free agency or in the next draft. The same will cover corners, linebackers, etc. So there's only one position in the league, and the players know this too, that is going to get a guaranteed deal. And even at that position, it's only going to be the elite of the elite that get that guaranteed contract. So it's not about if we do this, it's going to open the floodgates. No, it's not. No, it's not. It just exposes the hypocrisy, which if you're a regular listener to this show, you know I've dubbed the National Football League, the NHL, the National Hypocrisy League, for several reasons, and this is one of them here. They tell you as a fan, they tell you as a fan base that we are dedicated to winning, that this franchise is going to do whatever we can to build a winner and keep a consistent winner here, and it's our goal to lift up the Lombardi Trophy. They tell you all that stuff, and we as fans go out like lemmings to the sea, and go out and buy the merch, and go out and buy the season tickets, and put all the investment and emotion and time, etc. into it, and that's not really what they're trying to do, folks. Want another example? Okay, good. Using the same player. So the Ravens don't want to give Lamar Jackson a guaranteed deal. They offered him, they did what's known as the NFL in the collective bargaining agreement, is that they put the franchise tag on him. Meaning that franchise tag that he gets paid whatever the highest paid player at that position is getting for that season. So he'll get that. So he'll be making, if he were to take the franchise tag with the Ravens, he'd be getting anywhere between $38 and $40 million a year this year as a quarterback for the Ravens. Now you might say, well, wow, why didn't he just take that? Why doesn't he just take that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, he's standing on his principle. And two, the money is not guaranteed. Right? So they put the franchise tag, and there's two types of franchise tags. They put the non-exclusive franchise tag. There's exclusive and non-exclusive. They put the non-exclusive franchise tag on it. Now, what does that mean? What that means is this, is that because he does not have he has the non-exclusive franchise tag on him, that means that any other team in the National Hypocrisy League that would want to can negotiate with him and then make a trade to the Ravens. They would have to give up 2 first-round draft picks to the Ravens and pay the contract that they negotiated with Lamar Jackson. Now, the Ravens, though, have a chance to match that. They have a chance to match the contract. So if someone were to offer Lamar Jackson, let's say, a 5-year contract at $290 million guaranteed, since Watson got $280, then the Ravens would have a certain window of time to match that same contract if they wanted. If they didn't want to do that, then that's fine. That team that offered the contract would then have to give the Ravens their first-round draft pick this year and their first-round draft pick next year. So I just want to explain all that and get that out here so we can get a clear understanding of what's going on with this. Here's the situation. There are teams in the NFL right now that could desperately use somebody of Lamar Jackson's skill set. In fact, there's one in particular that's not very far from where he plays right now. As we said, he plays in Baltimore right now. But there's a team, about 30 miles or so away from him, called the Washington Commanders, who have one of the best wide receivers in the league in Terry McLaurin, have an outstanding running back, has bolstered up their offensive line during free agency, and has one of the better defenses, one of the top 10 defense in the National Football League. But they finished 8-1 last year. Now you may ask yourself, well, if they have all of that, Jeff, why did they finish 8-8-1? They finished 8-8-1 last year because their quarterbacks last year were Carson Wentz and Tyler Heineke, of which neither one are with the team anymore. So they had average to mediocre to below mediocre quarterback play. And that was not the only reason, but the primary reason that they finished 8-8-1, despite all the advantages that I just gave you at the running back position. Now their offensive line was not real good last year, but they still had Terry McLaurin. As I said, they have the running game, and they have one of the better defenses in the league. And when you look at the landscape of the National Conference, because they're in the NFC, the National Football Conference of the National Football League, when you look at the landscape there, and since I've already told you how important the position of quarterback is, if you look at the landscape of quarterbacks in the NFC, if the Washington Commanders were to sign Lamar Jackson and the Ravens didn't match, the Washington Commanders would immediately move up to the top of the food chain as one of the favorites to come out of the NFC for next year's Super Bowl. Because if you look at the NFC and the most important position is quarterback, right now you can make the argument that Jalen Hurts, he's not a bad quarterback, but Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the NFC right now. Just go through the other teams. Dak Prescott, he's a little above average. Daniel Jones had one good year, got $40 million. That's another story. Why the Giants did that, I don't know. When they could have let him play out next year on his rookie deal to see, and because he was still under contract for his rookie deal, under his rookie contract, to see if last season was a one-off or is he trending in that direction. But that's how they want to spend their money. That's not my money. I don't really care. And I'm not a fan of the Giants anyway, so it doesn't make me one bit of difference either way or the other. The NFC South, Desmond Ridder is a quarterback in Atlanta. Don't think they could use Lamar Jackson? Oh, by the way, they were in the hunt last year and in the race for Deshaun Watson. The Saints just signed Derek Carr. Now, Derek Carr is a little above average quarterback, but Derek Carr is not Lamar Jackson, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers just signed Baker Mayfield.
Well,
and
that's right.
Average to below average quarterback. And the Carolina Panthers in that division, as we said, have traded up to get the number one overall pick in the draft, and they're either going to draft C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, as we said. So far, you see what the quarterbacks in the NFC look like. What about the North? Well, Aaron Rodgers is all but out of Green Bay. Is just waiting for the trade to be consummated. He'll be with the Jets. Kirk Cousins he's okay. I mean, he's a little above average. He's not bad. He's not great. He's a little above average. In the right situation, with all the right circumstances, he can probably get you maybe to an NFC Championship game. If the cards fall right, maybe he can get you to a Super Bowl. But he's not a franchise-type quarterback. Puts up good numbers. That's why I'm saying he's above average. But he's not in the class of the elite quarterbacks. Chicago has Justin Fields. Jury's still out. Detroit has Jared Goff, and Jared Goff did take a team to a Super Bowl when he was with the Rams, and the Rams jettisoned him to Detroit in the Matthew Stafford trade, and he had a good season last year. But again, I don't believe that he's a franchise-type quarterback. He's good, but he's not great. What about the West, you ask? Well, they've got Geno Smith in Seattle. Good year last year. The aforementioned Matthew Stafford, who was contemplating retirement at one time. The San Francisco situation, they don't know if they're going to use Brock Purdy. He's injured. Or what they're going to do with Trey Lance, who is unproven. So you see this, and then the Cardinals have Kyler Murray, who in my opinion, Kyler Murray is overrated. So when you paint the picture then of the NFC, arguably, at worst, Lamar Jackson would be the second best quarterback in that conference. And you could say that he might even be the best because he has won an MVP and Jalen Hurts hasn't. So you look at that landscape, and if I'm Washington and I look at the landscape of the NFC, I look at the quarterbacks of the NFC, I look at what I already have, what is stopping me from pulling the trigger on a deal to at least try to get Lamar Jackson to force the Ravens' hands to make them then match what we would offer? What's stopping? Because remember, winning isn't the only everything, it's the only thing. Remember that. And they're selling, the Commanders are selling that to their fan base also. But they're not doing what they need to do in order to ensure that. Because, listen, all the Commanders would have to do is give up 2 first-round picks. Get some music. Give up 2 first-round picks and money. Guaranteed money. So in other words, what the Commanders are telling their fan base is that when we tell you that all we're concerned about is winning, that it's not everything, it's the only thing, we're lying to you. Because we are not willing to do what it takes to win because we don't want to buck the trend of the other owners. And this is especially curious given the fact that Daniel Snyder is the owner of the Washington franchise and the other owners want him out anyway. So why would he even care about what the other owners think or what they want and not bucking the trend? But even Daniel Snyder is going along with the hypocrisy. So if you're a fan of a team that does not have a franchise quarterback, and there are only a few of them around, and your team is telling you that it's all about winning, that all they want to do is win, that winning's not everything, it's the only thing, and all the blasé propaganda and, the flowery talk that you get from your front offices, don't believe them. Because here is a golden opportunity. You mean to tell me, Atlanta, you'd rather go with Desmond Ridder than Lamar Jackson? Really? You're selling that to your fan base. Then you hear all this stuff in the media about, well, Lamar Jackson needs to get an agent. See, because if he had an agent could negotiate for him and, let him know what's going on and all that. I don't want to hear all that. Because if he did have an agent, if Lamar Jackson wants a guaranteed contract, and he's not willing to move off of that, which I encourage him not to move off of it, to stand his ground, then if he did have an agent, it doesn't make a difference anyway. Well, without an agent, the teams don't know how to contact him. Man, come on, man. Really? Really? You're going to sell that? That's laughable. To quote Michael Corleone in The Godfather, you insult my intelligence. Because if a team really wanted to get in contact with Lamar Jackson, they would know how to get in contact with Lamar Jackson. They can go, there's something called the NFLPA. Know what that stands for? It stands for the National Football League Players Association. All they would have to do is go to the union, to the Players Association, said team, Washington Commanders, and say, can you please give us Lamar Jackson's number? Because we want to talk to him about signing him to a guaranteed contract. You think the Players Association will say, oh, no, we're not going to give you that number. So I'm just telling you all of this, folks, and those of you that follow this, that hear all this garbage that gets spewed over these networks about he doesn't have an agent, or because he doesn't have an agent, teams don't know how to get to him, or if he had an agent, he can know what other teams are thinking and feeling. I can tell you what other teams are thinking and feeling. They're thinking and feeling that we don't want to pay him a guaranteed contract because if we give him one, then we're going to set a trend. I see we have a caller. I see we have a caller. Caller, welcome to the right side. Caller, state your name and where you're calling from. Caller, are you there? Caller, are you there? Okay, caller, please call back because I really like to hear what you have to say. Please call back. We'd really like to hear what you have to say, caller. Sorry that we missed your call, but give us a call back because we really would like to hear what you have to say. As I'm interested in what you have to say to us today. So where was I? So if these teams do not believe all the stuff that you're hearing on ESPN and Fox Sports and others on Get Up and other shows like that, where you have these talking heads on there talking about how Lamar Jackson needs an agent. If he doesn't have an agent, then he can't negotiate, or teams don't know how to negotiate with him. Don't believe that stuff, folks. Do not believe it because it's not real. Okay? It's not real. If the team really wanted to, they could. But the reason, that's what I was saying. The reason that they don't want to is they do not want to start this trend. That when players of his stature, players of his ilk, they don't want to pay the guaranteed contract, which then translates into they really do not. We got a caller. We got a caller. Caller, are you there? I'm sorry, caller. Try again. We must be having some difficulties with our phones. I do apologize. Please try again in a couple more minutes. We'll try again. We'll try to figure out what's going on with the phones here and work that out. So if you can just give us a couple minutes, we'll try to work these phones out and see what's going on because we really like to hear what it is you have to say, caller, or wherever you are. Okay, I think we're still having some difficulty with our phones here. But the problem is this, is that they don't want to start this trend. Because they start this trend, then with others like Joe Burrow's contract, which will be up in 2 years. So you can imagine if they pay, so they're looking at it this way, if we give Lamar Jackson a fully guaranteed deal, then what are we going to do when Joe Burrow's contract comes up? What are we going to do when Justin Herbert's contract comes up? What are we going to do about 3 or 4 years down the road when Trevor Lawrence's contract comes up? My answer to that question is pay them their money and give them the guaranteed contract because you need them to win. It's not like any of you are holding yard sales to raise money out here because all of you are multi-billionaires. You all are billionaires. So it's not as though you're poor and don't cry poor and pauper to me when there is not one owner in the National Football League that's losing money because you have the sweetheart television contract deal with ESPN, you have the sweetheart contract television deal with Fox Sports and NBC and ABC and ESPN, as we just said, and NBC for Sunday Night Football. Do not cry that with me. You are making money hand over fist. So either do one of two things. Either go ahead and sign these players, this elite group of players. As I said, it's not going to be every player. That's a lie. If the owners that are perpetrating that out here, putting that out here, are just telling you a lie. They're telling you a lie. So stop putting the lie out there, or just say, you know what? We really don't want to do everything that we have to do to win. We want to do almost everything we have to do to win, but we're not going to pay, we're not going to guarantee a player's contract, a player that can really help us win. We're not going to guarantee his contract. We're not going to do that. All right? So be honest with the fans. At least say that, but don't come up with this ruse, this guise, this false narrative that you put out here that winning is the only thing, that we're committed to winning, we're committed to excellence in this franchise. No, you're not, because that's a lie. Atlanta Falcons, that's a lie. Desmond Ridder, please. Washington Commanders, don't even know who your quarterback's going to be. Please. Do I need to go on down the list of teams that need quarterbacks that could use him? Tampa Buccaneers? Really? You think Mike Evans and Godwin are... We have a caller. Caller, are you there? Okay. Again, I apologize for the phones. There's something going on with the phones that we're not able to get you in right now. I'll give a signal. I'll let you guys know when you can call in. But right now, we're having an issue with our phones where we're not able to get your calls in right now. I do apologize, but stick with us. As soon as possible, as soon as we can, we're going to get your calls in. We're going to get your calls in as soon as we can. Trust me, I appreciate all four of you who have called during this time, and we're going to do our best. We're going to make a maximum effort to get your calls in. Moving on to our next topic for the first hour. Former President Donald Trump will soon be indicted by the Southern District of New York for improper finance during the campaign, during his payoff to porn actress Stephanie Clifford, aka Stormy Daniels. And the indictment is going to come. Trump himself went on his media outlet, Truth Social, that has about 4 followers. Oh, no, just kidding. And declared a week ago today that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. And of course, when he did that, that set the people off in Trump world to carry their pitchforks and lanterns and to come on the American Pravda, American TASS, Fox News. For those of you who don't know, Pravda and TASS are the media outlets of Russia. And to talk about we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with you. We're going to take a short break at this moment. We'll be right back with you.
When she came down, she went downstairs and let us in. Right. And then she told us to come to the hall, the end of the hall. So that's how we got here.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're back. Let's hold off on the calls for right now. As I said, we're having some issues with our phones right now. So if you're listening, just hold off on the calls for a moment. We'll let you know when this phone situation is rectified. Again, I do apologize. So as I was saying, Donald Trump came out last week on Truth Social and said that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, which no one had said, which to the surprise of it, no one, which proved to be a lie given the source. And as I said, it just sent reverberations all through Trump world, as we said on the American Pravda, American Task is what I call it, but it's better known by its moniker as Fox News, which it should drop the news from it because there are no news on there at all. As I said, it's a propaganda tool for the Republican Party. And to prove the power of the cult of Trump, it set the firestorm off among all Republican politicians throughout the country. And the sadly ironic thing about this, folks, is that these people know better, and yet they are so intimidated by the Trump base that instead of doing what is the right thing, even people who are declared candidates for the Republican nomination in 2024, these were declared candidates for the Republican nomination, like Nikki Haley, like former Vice President Mike Pence, and even Governor Ron Benito Mussolini DeSantis of the fascist state of Florida. Even those that have opposed Trump in the past and really have made statements showing that they don't really care for him, like Senator Lindsey Graham, like Marco Rubio, like Ted Cruz. I mean, the list goes on and on. They all flock to his defense, saying things that they know are not real, saying things that they know are not true, saying things they know are not real. You all can call now. Our phones are back. So those that were calling in, those people that were calling in, our phones are back up now. So you can call in here in the last few minutes that we have in the first part of this hour. They know these aren't true. So why are they doing this? Why is American Pravda, aka Fox News, why are they doing this? Why are Lindsey Graham, who knows better, Marco Rubio, who knows better, Ted Cruz, well, I don't know what he knows, and like I said, Benito Mussolini, aka Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Elise Stefanik. I mean, I can go on and on. Why are they doing this? Well, there's a couple of reasons, folks. One, as I said, is that they either buy into this, which is sad, or they have no guts. As I said, if you're a regular listener to this program, you know I've dubbed them the eunuch party. If you don't know what a eunuch is, go look it up. So they're either buying into this because they believe all of this, or they are political eunuchs and they are afraid of Trump and his base, and they won't stand up and tell the truth. Here are the ramifications of this. Now, Southern District of New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg has now began to receive death threats. He got a letter yesterday saying, "I'm going to kill you," and there was white powder that later, thank God, proved to be non-lethal and was not dangerous. Trump put on his Truth Social outlet a picture of him standing with a baseball bat next to a picture of a headshot of Alvin Bragg. He also called for his people to come out in the streets and protest. Now, if you have an amnesia for some reason, if you can't remember, let me refresh your memory then. The last time that he called for his people to come to a certain place, we have a caller. Caller, welcome to the right side. Caller, state your name and where you're calling from.
My name is Sean, and I'm calling from Cleveland, Ohio.
Hi. Welcome to Right Side. What's on your mind?
Well, let me go back to your first take about the quarterback in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Ozzie Newsome, who was the former general manager of the Ravens, last week he made a statement, and he said that the Watson contract that Cleveland offered or gave basically has ruined every contract in the NFL, and more so for Jackson. Yeah. And he said there is no way that no team is ever going to give another guaranteed contract. It's just not going to happen. So, in essence, what has occurred, in my opinion, Jeff, is that the owners have colluded not to offer Watson,
Jackson,
the contract that he deserves.
Exactly.
Now, will he sign with Baltimore, or will he just sit out a year?
Well, here's the thing, and so if he sits out a year, then he comes back next year. The Ravens still control his rights, so then they could offer him another franchise. They can franchise him again next year. So he in effect would have to sit out 2 years before he could become a totally free agent. And I'm glad that you brought that out because it is crystal clear. Ozzie Newsome used to be the GM of the Ravens, Hall of Fame football player, Hall of Fame GM. First black GM of the NFL, just to put it in the historical perspective. But with him being on the inside, he knows. And all that does is just expose or affirm, I guess, what I've been saying all along, is that the owners don't really care about winning. That is not their number one priority. Their number one, and you brought it up, not Jeff Doggett on the right side didn't say this. Ozzie Newsome, a former GM, a Hall of Fame GM, said the quiet part out loud.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember, if I have the years right, Ozzie was the one who brought Jackson.
Yeah, he drafted him. He drafted him. Yes, he did. He drafted him in 2016.
Brought out in another interview,
18.
It was brought out by Ozzie that if he was still the GM, he would have been signed a year ago.
So I wonder what he meant by that. Would he have given him a guaranteed deal? We don't know.
I don't know Ozzie personally like that. It depends. It's beside his money. I did go to, I do know the cap specialist at the Ravens. Mm-hmm. He's a Clevelander. I won't tell you what high school he went to. He's a proud Benedictine grad like I am. Moriarty. I didn't mention the school's name.
No, you did.
But
the Bengals.
I don't think maybe in the next 3 to 4 years we won't see guaranteed contracts because, as you're aware, every owner in the NFL is angry with the hazards. They're angry because they just ruined the financial cap structure for all teams going forward. And let's also put another finger on the scale here. The Players Association also blew it for themselves because they're the ones who agreed with the owners on not only the cap level, they also agreed with the expansion of the games.
They did. You're right.
They negotiated, or they agreed to this free agency net that all of them have to live under.
You're right, and there was a split there too. Just for information for those that are listening, there was a split there because the last CBA collective bargaining agreement got approved before the 2021 season. and it was narrowly approved. And what happened is that for lack of better term, the rank and file type players voted to accept this contract, where the more elite level players voted to reject the CBA. And so you saw the division there. So you're right, they are culpable in it as well. But again, as I said earlier, and we're going to have to go in a moment because we're getting to the top of our hour here. But, as we said just a few moments ago, the owners give the illusion and give the impression to their fan bases throughout the country. This is not exclusive to Baltimore. And let me just say this about the Haslam thing. You know what? They're upset at the Haslams. Too bad. They weren't upset then when the Haslams continued to put a mediocre product out on the field. Right. Nobody was saying anything about that then. They weren't upset then. But because the Haslams, as some would say, had overpaid to get Deshaun Watson here, and they broke the trend, so to speak. Now they're upset. The hypocrisy and the lie is this: not every player. I'm going to say this again. I'm going to say this until the cows come home. Not every player in the NFL, when his contract is up, is going to get a guaranteed deal, and they know that. It is only going to be the elite of the elite. I can tell you their names right now: Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert. Mahomes has his contract. When his next deal comes, which will be about 4 or 5 years from now, then they'll look at it. The kid in Buffalo signed his last year, Josh Allen. So Josh Allen's contract is not up for another 5 years. So right now, the only quarterbacks, and these are the only players in the league right now that would even sniff a guaranteed deal, are 3 players. So you mean to tell me that you're going to try to perpetrate this lie, this fraud, this deception on the public by saying, well, if you do this, it's just going to ruin the salary structure and ruin? No, it's not. It's going to take away some power and control that you have. And that's what this is all about, which again goes back to my original hypothesis that the National Football League is really the National Hypocrisy League. They're not concerned about just winning. They're concerned about keeping power and keeping control. I thank you for
real quick. Real quick, I'm going to hang up. When you talk about the indictment of Donald Trump, especially on the New York Manhattan issue, you have to mention the senator from Carolina.
Oh yes, Mr. Scott. Yes, I was going to get to him. Okay. Mr. Timmy Scott. Yes. Yes.
Not Tim Scott. The gentleman Edwards, the former Senator Edwards.
Oh, John Edwards. John Edwards. Yeah.
He did the same thing.
Yeah, he did the same thing.
He spent a day in jail. He did pay a fine because he used campaign funds to support the young lady, if I may. So,
right.
Here we go. But great subject.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for calling. And this may not be the best of indictments. My whole point is whether the indictment, whether it will lead to a conviction or not, that's not the point. My point is what Donald Trump and his...
Your wife talking about sports.
I'm sorry, we have a caller?
Sports on this phone call.
Okay, caller, I'm sorry, caller. State your name and where you're calling from.
You said 4 o'clock. They threw. Yeah, they threw.
Okay, so let me finish this point and then we're going to take a break and we'll introduce our guest for the second hour.
You can also try unplugging your device.
But, yes, whether this is going to lead to an indictment, into a arrest and all that, to me is a moot point. Here is the issue as I see it, is that Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the propaganda tool known as Fox News have now brought us to another dangerous precipice and spot in this country right now, where now Alvin Bragg's life is has been threatened. Violence has been suggested. And we're back to that again. This is what I'm talking about. John Edwards didn't do any of these things. When it came up with him, he paid his fine, did what he did. He didn't go run to MSNBC or some other network. And if he would have run to a network, they would have reported the story as is, not use it as a tool to say, woe is me and how I'm being persecuted. That's the point I wanted to make about that. You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be right back at you after the top of the hour with the second hour of our show. Thank you.
Has violence happened to you or your family? Violence can affect all parts of your life, sometimes in ways you can't see. Violence can affect the way you eat, sleep. It causes you to lose focus, feel angry, afraid, or even use drugs or drinking as a way to escape. But we're here to tell you that violence doesn't have to keep hurting, and you can change your life starting now with help from the Trauma Recovery Center. We want you to take control of your life. Today can be the day. The Trauma Recovery Center offers real help for real needs in real time. They offer services for food, clothes, safety, emotional support, and a whole lot more. So listen, don't let violence control you. You can break free, and TRC can help. Give them a call at 216-644-5487. They will come to you wherever you are. They offer real help for real needs in real time. They can give you the tools to rebuild your life and your health. Again, they can give you the tools to rebuild your life and your health. Call today. They're free, they're 24/7, and they're confidential. So look, if you want out and don't know where to start, call the Trauma Recovery Center. The Trauma Recovery Center will help you take back your life after violence started today. Call today. Get the help you need today. If you're listening, if you're watching, the numbers on the screen, 216-644-5487. Again, 216-644-5487. The Trauma Recovery Center of Northeast Ohio, also affiliated with the Center for Families and Children. All right, and as we do every day of the week here at No Static Radio and here on The Right Side, we celebrate our History 365. And today I want to introduce to some and reintroduce to others James McCune Smith. James McCune Smith, born April 1st, 1812, and departed this earth November 25th, 1870, was an American physician, apothecary, if I'm not mistaken, abolitionist, and author who was born in Manhattan, New York. He was the first Afro-American to hold a medical degree awarded by the University of Glasgow in Glasgow, Scotland. After his return to the United States, he became the first Afro-American to run a pharmacy in the nation. In addition to practicing as a physician nearly 20 years at the Colored Orphan Asylum in Manhattan, Smith was a public intellectual. He contributed to articles to medical journals, participated in learned societies, and wrote numerous essays and articles drawing from his medical and statistical training. He used his training in medicine and statistics to refute common misconceptions about race, intelligence, medicine, and society in general. He was invited as a founding member of the New York Statistics Society in 1852, which promoted a new science. Later, he was elected as a member in 1854 of the recent founded American Geographic Society. He was never admitted to the American Medical Association or local medical associations, very likely as a result of systematic racism that Smith confronted throughout his medical career. So, skipping down to his life, Smith was born into slavery in 1813 in Manhattan and was set free July 4th, 1827, at the age of 14 by the Emancipation of New York. This was the final date when New York officially freed remaining slaves. His mother was an enslaved woman named Lavinia, who achieved her freedom later in life in 1855. Smith described, and that's because she moved to the West, you guys, but I'll explain that later on. Smith described her as a self-emancipated woman. She was born into slavery in South Carolina and had been brought to New York as a slave. His father, Samuel Smith, a merchant, and his mother, his father was white, by the way, and his mother, a master, who had brought her to New York from South Carolina. He grew up only with his mother as an adult. James Smith alluded to white ancestry through his mother's family, saying he had kin in the South, some of whom were slaveholders. Listen, there's so much to learn about this. So, like during his medicine career, and through these census, he was considered white sometimes until he exposed himself, and that caused problems, you guys. But let me tell you, through all of his works, he left great honors and legacy. So in 2018, the New York Academy of Medicine posthumously inducted Smith as a fellow of the Academy, 171 years after his nomination and 153 years after his death. At the 2008 Discourse and Award Ceremony, the NYAM President Judith Salerno presented the replica certificate of fellowship to Professor Joan Edie Rose, who accepted it on behalf of Smith's descendants. And in 2019, the Academy also formally unveiled a portrait of Smith commissioned by the Academy fellow Dr. Daniel LaRoche and painted by Junior Jacques. It is now on display at the Academy. The University of Glasgow, Smith's alma mater, has named its new learning hub, the building after James Smith, the learning hub of James Smith, and it opened to students in early 2021. The university was also and has also established a scholarship and an annual lecture named after Smith. Listen, you guys, I say it all the time. If you don't want to go visit a library, if you don't want to stop at a library, Google. If you don't want to hit up those books, Google it. Google Black inventors, Google Black American inventors. Knowing your history is knowing your now. And now back to Jeff Doggett with the right side.
Thank you, Marie. Well, if you've been listening this month, you know that this month of March is a Women's History Month. And throughout the month, we have featured prominent women in various walks of life. The first Saturday of the month, we had what we called our two queens talking sports. We had LaShawn Terrell, aka Lady Shawn T, and also Brenda Holbert. In the second week, we had Billy Gilliam, who is the executive and clinical director of all the Greater Cleveland YWCAs. Last week, we had in studio the founder and the director of Josiah House, Ms. Eileen Jones, and then we had and that was in the first hour. In the second hour, we had the CEO and entrepreneur, Ramona Hazel, in studio. And today, on this last Saturday of the month, in the last Saturday of Women's History Month, once again, we are honored to have in studio with us a very prominent woman in her walk of life. As if you're a regular listener to your show, you know that I say that the better the guest, the better the show. And we have a very great guest with us today. I want to introduce to some and to present to others our guest here in the second hour, Ms. Richanda Jackson Birks. who is the progenitor of and the executive of 2Biosphere. And we're going to talk about what 2Biosphere is here in this hour. If you have any questions for our guest this hour, please feel free to call us at 216-939-5087. Ms. Jackson Birks, first of all, welcome to No Static Radio. Welcome to the right side. Tell our audience exactly who is Richanda Jackson Birks and what is 2Biosphere?
Well, 2Biosphere is a nonprofit organization that I founded about 2019, approximately March of 2019 to be exact.
So 4 years ago.
Yeah, almost 4 years ago. And it's actually a organization for trauma education and advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
I have over 27 years dealing with individuals in crisis, and my personal walk of life, also dealing with trauma and other things, really led me to start this organization to talk to individuals who are dealing with and trying to overcome the effects of trauma.
Okay, and prior to you starting 2Biosphere 4 years ago this month, what was your previous experience in this field? Did you have training? Did you work in this field prior to you starting 2Biosphere? What was your previous experience?
Actually, I was working for the Cleveland Division of Police as a dispatcher. So I worked for it as a dispatcher for over 22 years. And so, of course, people calling in for 911 are in a crisis. They're in an emergency. So I was the one who answered the phone, and I actually worked my way up and became a supervisor before my transition out.
Okay, well, yeah, that was a fertile training ground.
Yes.
Then. So what inspired you to start 2Biosphere?
Well, what I thought about as the years went on and I became more seasoned in what I was doing, I realized that I had to look a little bit deeper as to why people were calling, and understanding that oftentimes, most times, people are calling because they have some hidden trauma that's unaddressed. And in order to understand what they're dealing with now, we have to go into their past and their background to understand what led up to this point. And so I became really passionate about that in my later years working as a dispatcher, and I just decided to pursue it a little bit different. I wanted to help in a different way.
Now, in your experience as a dispatcher for CPD, especially being a 911 dispatcher, was there certain or specific type of training that taught you how to prioritize calls, and if so, were you then able to take that training that you had into starting 2Biosphere and allow you to prioritize? Again, not saying that that a person's trauma experience is not important to them, but you have to, especially as a 911 dispatcher, you have to prioritize what is immediate right now and what perhaps might not be. Were you able to then take that training and apply it to what you're doing now?
So in the departmental training for the Cleveland Division, of course, we learn what different type of priority calls are. It's always life over property, of course. But in my current position, it's a different spin. It's not, I didn't take any of that training into what I am doing now. It's a totally new arena, a totally new era. And so I'm just dealing with just people in general on a whole, and being able to look at their behaviors and to say, hey, this may be trauma. Whereas in 911, I'm just hearing the calls, but now I'm actually looking at people and how they're responding and saying something else may be going on with that person.
You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure not bring the noise. We have in studio with us in celebration of Women's History Month, Ms. Richanda Jackson Birks, who is the founder of 2Biosphere, that deals with generational dysfunction and trauma. Generational trauma that's caused by dysfunction. I'm sorry. And if you have questions for her, our guest, please give us a call at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. Richanda, what, if any, level does abuse and trauma lead to individuals becoming involved with and addicted to drugs and alcohol?
Well, it just depends, actually. Trauma, a lot of people throw that word around very loosely. I was traumatized by this or that traumatized me. But trauma really is how you perceive that event, it's how it affected you. It's not the event itself, because something as small as a minor fender bender could turn into a trauma for someone depending on how they perceived it. If they perceived it as dangerous, if they perceived it as life threatening, it can ultimately turn into a trauma, and then you begin to do certain things that tells you that it's a trauma. You may have flashbacks, you may have anxiety when it comes to thinking about that. You may get away from it altogether. You may, if we're talking about a car accident per se, let's use that as an example, you actually may not want to drive your car for a very long time. That's what determines it's a trauma. And so in knowing that and understanding that, we have to look at how are people responding after they've experienced this event. It doesn't even have to be something that you experienced. It could be something that you witnessed or something that you know about. A current situation that we all have dealt with was the current pandemic. That was a trauma for some people.
Yeah, yes, it was, and in fact, studies have shown that since the pandemic, and during the pandemic, and then coming out of as a result of that, it exposed a lot of people that were going through depression and things like that. Do we have a caller on the line? Okay, I thought I heard something. I'm sorry. So you said that trauma is different for each individual. Yep. Is there a set definition? In other words, is there a way you define trauma, or there really is no set definition for that?
There is. Trauma is basically an event or series of events that overwhelms your coping capacity. You don't have the tools, or you don't know what to do to deal with it. So it literally overwhelms you. And and you don't know how to fix it. You don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to understand exactly what's going on with you. So trauma basically, again, is anything that overwhelms your ability to cope.
Now, we hear a lot about post-traumatic stress syndrome. So the word trauma is in there.
Yes.
And, it has in some cases, some very tragic ramifications of that. Can you explain to our audience exactly what PTSD is, and how, if any way, do you treat that or deal with that with two biosphere?
So post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have to understand that everyone who has a trauma does not develop the disorder. It may be a traumatic event that may induce stress, but everyone does not experience the disorder. That's when you get into the medical. So you have to be diagnosed for that disorder. So again, from what I know about PTSD, the event happens, you kind of go to a peak, you hit a peak, which is where you're experiencing that anxiety, you're experiencing those nightmares, you're experiencing those things that are really taking you out of your regular element of your life. You can't function in a certain way. And then after a while, it begins to level off. Usually after a month or so of a traumatic event, usually you tend to go back to your homeostasis state. You tend to go back to your regular state. But with post-traumatic stress disorder, you stay up for a very long time. And you're never coming down from what you experienced. And that's when you have to get diagnosed. And a medical doctor has to diagnose you and say that you literally have post-traumatic stress disorder, because you're not coming back to homeostasis. You're constantly at that heightened level of arousal.
Okay, I see. So I'm just curious, and maybe you can answer this question, maybe not, but we hear a lot of veterans, especially veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, that come home and they're experiencing or suffering from PTSD. And, that quite a few veterans have committed suicide and what have you behind that. But I know as a student of history, you didn't hear a lot about that from soldiers that, say, fought in previous wars like World War II or Korea or something of that nature. Is it a difference in generations, or is it because that time it wasn't just not being diagnosed, or kind of people just kind of kept it within?
No, it just wasn't talked about. It's always been a thing, but as with anything, as we know that even now, the world is more open to talking about anxiety and depression, and it's okay not to be okay. But World Mental Health Day was established back in 1960. Mm-hmm. This isn't a new concept. It's new to talk about now because, again, back then, there's a stigma attached with mental illness. There's a stigma attached. There's a stigma attached to mental illness, and so people don't want to talk about it.
I want to talk about it.
I'm sorry, I didn't even know we had a caller.
Yeah, me neither. Nothing.
Okay, Jeff, this is Todd. You hear me okay?
Yes, Todd, we do hear you. Welcome to the right side, Todd. We have in studio with us Richanda Jackson Birks from 2 Biosphere. What's your question for her?
I have a question, but I want to answer your question first. When you were asking, when you were saying you didn't hear too much about it from veterans from the First and Second World War and the Korean War, the information did not travel as easily then as it does today on the accurate assessment of facts of any given matter. The truthful, accurate assessment of facts of any given matter travels faster and more efficiently at a broader scale today. And I'm referencing today is a time period meaning the last 30 years than all of history before. So there were people talking about it, and there were people going through it in the veterans hospitals, and there's hundreds of thousands of diagnoses of these things, of these matters. They existed. It's just that the information wasn't as easily accessible to the general public. It was often things that were talked about amongst people that were going through it and professionals that were taking care of them and nobody else.
Yeah, I think sometimes they would determine it and call them that this certain soldier was suffering with what they call shell shock, which we would now call PTSD. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what it was called. It was called shell. That's the slang term for shell shock. But let me pronounce your name correctly. Is it Richanda?
That's correct.
Okay, Richanda, my name is Todd. Educate me a little bit better on what you mean when you say generational trauma, because generational to me implies that it carried over from a parent or a grandparent to someone who may not have actually experienced it. Could you educate me better what you were referencing with that?
So yes, generational trauma does transfer, and it's all about the behaviors. I'm gonna give you an example. So
can you give me a definition
of generational trauma?
Generational trauma. Yeah, explain to me so I understand what you're conveying when you're claiming that someone who never experienced this trauma is actually feeling the effects of the trauma because the grandparent experienced it, who they may never even met. They may be dead.
Absolutely.
A little bit better.
Absolutely. So what happens is generation after generation, different behaviors are taught or learned because your great-grandmother did certain things and now it's transferred to your mother. Now it's transferred to you. Okay, and then in the simplest term, let's go back to something as simple as slavery, what we all understand. In slavery times, if you think about it, in slavery times, when the slave owners would abuse or whip, for lack of a better term, the slaves, that was a way of keeping them in control. So as generations have passed, there's a lot of spankings and whoopings that comes from that type of generational trauma. For a simple definition for you, example.
Well, that's behavior, not trauma.
Trauma is behavior.
Trauma would be that's demonstrating the behavior of someone that came before. But trauma would be something like there are people that are intensely scared or intensely distrustful of white people because of slavery. That would be more in line with trauma. And that wouldn't necessarily be directly related to behavior of acting out as much as it is operating in caution.
Well, trauma is actually an emotional response. Mm-hmm. And if you think about a response it's an emotional response. It's a behavior. Emotional response, a response is a behavior all the way around. And so a trauma is an emotional response to something. So if I'm learning this behavior, all behavior is communication. First of all, I want to say that. If you know All behavior is communication. So like, just like an infant, I'm gonna cry to get your attention. That's my behavior. Just like individuals, they are communicating something in the way that they're behaving. So that generational behavior is passed down. And again, it stems from something that you may not have even experienced, but because your ancestors or people that you know that passed this down to you, now you're doing it because you assume that's the right way. But that slavery was a trauma.
Traumatic. How you fix it?
How do you fix what?
How you fix somebody who's suffering from generational trauma?
You just don't like that question.
They're not in touch, nor have they ever been in touch with the person that initially felt the impact of the trauma. Mm-hmm. How do you fix that?
The first thing you have to do is recognize that it's there. A lot of us don't recognize that it's there. We say, oh, this is how I am. This is just how I behave. Right. Take it or leave it. This is just me. This is how I was born. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. You're behaving out of a way to say something is wrong. We look at aggression in our young people. We look at aggression. We look at bullying. We look at anger. We look at dysfunction throughout the families. All of that is attributed to trauma. And again, it may not be. You may not have even met the person. All of it. I'm going to say all of it. If you look at the family dynamic today, okay, look at our young people and how they're acting.
Now, when you say family, just so I'm clear, when you say the family dynamic, are you referencing a particular group of our society?
No.
Such as African Americans?
No.
Or are you talking about
I'm talking about across the board.
Okay, I'm listening.
I'm talking about across the board. There was a study done, if you didn't know, there was a study done back in the 1990s called the ACEs study. It was the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And in that
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and in that study, they studied individuals from not even the African American culture, and what they realized is that trauma is more prevalent than we think. It doesn't matter where you come from. That is an equal opportunity response. So trauma has nothing to do with black or white.
Okay, what you're saying, look at this. So you said, before I cut in to make sure I got clarity, you said, look at our family today. Look at our family today. So go ahead, where were you?
Our family dynamics today. So when you look at our young people, as you know, that a lot of our young people are dealing with things that some of us who are of an older generation didn't have to deal with. On top of social media. Well, right now that you're looking at there's a lot of physical abuse, there's a lot of neglect, there's a lot of where children are raising themselves based on social media, and the family, the individual in the family have to work. So when my great-grandmother was coming up, she didn't have to work. My grandfather worked. And so she was there to take care of the families. But now, because of the dynamics has changed, it's different.
But most black women did have to work when you had, I don't even know how old you are, but I know that if you had a great-grandparent that was existing sometime in the 20th century and you were black, most black women did have to work.
A lot of them, yeah.
Most. No matter how good or stable the family was economically, most black women had to work.
You talking about in the 20th century?
Agreement. Yeah, it was part of their team agreement.
You talking about in the 20th century?
In the 20th century and in the 19th century, after slavery, almost all of them had to work because there was no other way for the team to make it.
Well, that may be your experience. I'm not saying yay or nay, but from my experience and from what I know that a lot of families were headed up by fathers who worked, and the mothers took care of the children. Well, there was more presence in the household.
I want you to be in this. Jeff, I want you to be in this. Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I want you to be in this too. Think about what you're saying, Richanda, and I'm not. My intention is not to be argumentative. I just want to be clear.
I don't take it that way.
Because I think you have a healthy pursuit here. Coming out of slavery, there was very little work for anybody that was African American and free. So in order for the team, whatever that team may have been, the husband, the wife, and the grandparents, or the husband, wife, and the brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, everybody had to contribute because there was so little work available.
It did. Well, in that case, Ty,
So that was the case all the way up.
Let me just interject here. So in that case, you'd have to go almost region by region in that. For example, in the post-Civil War South, and let's go even past Reconstruction. Let's look at the era of the black codes and Jim Crow and what have you, that basically is from 1876 up, and then we'll go to just to the 20th century. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Up to that period of time. In the southern part of the United States, you're right. You know, families, especially that time, were sharecroppers for the most part. It was not 100% domestic, etc. And a lot of black men weren't able to get work due to the racial oppression and the economic oppression. So as you said, or if they did, they were working as sharecroppers. Those who worked outside of the home were primarily domestics. Now, you know, black men did develop trades and what have you. But in other parts of the country, primarily in the north and the east, you did have this this dynamic. Because I can, you know, go back. I can't go back to my great grandparents, but I can go back to my grandparents on both my maternal grandparents and my paternal grandparents. My paternal grandparents, my grandfather, my parents grew up in Steubenville, Ohio, and so my grandfather worked for the post office. My grandmother stayed at home and was what we would call today a housewife, took care and raised the children. My maternal grandparents, my grandfather worked in the coal mines first and then worked in the steel mill, and my grandmother stayed home and raised the family.
You're missing something that I'm saying. I'm in agreement that it does exist all throughout our history, that the women stayed home and took care of the kids. I'm saying though, the majority, you can find thousands of cases.
Again, I don't know if I say majority, because I would say again, regionally yes, especially especially in the Jim Crow South, I would agree with you wholeheartedly that was the case. But and not that things were better in the north and the east. I'm not saying that because we experience racism and all that. And that's a whole different topic. But I would say more leaning towards what our guest is saying today. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She's connecting trauma of children today based on the belief system that they have to do more for themselves now because the parent's not home, as opposed to before, when a parent was home, or some people would say a village of parents were home. And I'm trying to make sure that there's a tie in there, that she's referencing the majority based on fact, not opinion, not based on factual occurrences, as opposed to just opinion.
Actually, I
don't recognize that as being true.
I was using that as an example. I wasn't saying that was the case for entirely. I was using I was looking at the family dynamic today, how it is different, and I was going into some different issues, but you got caught up on that one issue about that, so you didn't quite let me finish.
Right.
But it's okay.
Right.
We needed that to get to the point where we're talking about now. So again, our children have a lot to contend with. As it relates to trauma in their communities and how they grew up. If they grew up in impoverished situations, if they grew up where there was mental illness in their family, or a family member suffered from drugs and alcohol, or there was some type of emotional or physical abuse, sexual abuse, those things are traumas that again affect a child and their development, which causes their behaviors to exhibit that as they're growing.
Todd, I'm going to let you make your last point here, and then we.
No, I don't need to make any more points. I don't need to make any more points. I'm looking at the clock. She's limited on her time. So go ahead. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. So, Richanda, I wanted to ask you this too. This is actually Todd asked the one question I was going to ask, so I'm going to skip that. But I wanted to ask you: is this true, or is it just a myth that abusers, people who have been abused, tend to go up and be abusers?
That's not necessarily the case. Absolutely not.
So that's more so a myth.
That's more so a myth.
That's more so a myth.
There's a potential there, but it's not the case.
Okay.
In every situation.
Because I've heard that people who have been abused have a higher tendency and a higher proclivity, if you will, to abuse when they're, when they become adults. And so I just wanted to get that.
They have a higher chance, their risk is higher, but it's not necessarily everyone who experiences.
Okay, then the follow-up with that then is how much, if any, is trauma a catalyst for those who become criminals, who decide to pursue a life of crime? We hear so many stories about how fathers weren't there, or what have you, that they were traumatized as children, and what have you, that that trauma led to them. Are there some statistics that back this up, or is that another myth as well?
There are statistics. I don't know them exactly, but there is a direct correlation between trauma and being in the criminal justice system, trauma and being abusing drugs and alcohol. So trauma as mental illness. There is a direct correlation in some cases to those outcomes.
You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We have in studio with us Richanda Jackson Birks from To Biosphere. Richanda, we hear so much today about the stress and the trauma that young people are under. You were starting to allude to that while we were talking with Todd. What makes, I have my theories, but I just wanted to hear your theories on this. What makes this generation more susceptible, if you will, to this trauma and stress, say, than previous generations, say like your generation or maybe the generation I came up in? Primarily the role that social media plays and the bullying that goes along with that. Because here's why I ask. When I was coming up, we used to do what we call Jonesing people, where, you talk about somebody like, they used to say about my sister and I that we don't have 4 heads, we have 8 heads, because we have big foreheads, things like that. And, you play dozens on each other and, crack on each other, etc. We never looked at that as bullying. But now, this same type of language in some circles are viewed, I'm going to get back to the thing about spanking too in a minute, but in some circles it is viewed as bullying. So is a different generation now, or social media, have we relaxed the standards or broadened the standards, I should say, more so for what bullying that causes trauma is? So
I think we have a name for it now. I think during my generation, we definitely said, now I can say we had a bully, but again, how we handled the bully was totally different. The world didn't know we had a bully, right? So when you get into social media, it was between me, the bully, and maybe some classmates. Mm-hmm. But now the whole world knows, and now it's considered, it's like national news. So yes, if children who are dealing with bullying, it becomes of greater magnitude when the whole world can see that you're being bullied and you don't know how to take care of it. You don't know how to handle it. You don't know how to deal with the stresses of that. And so again, it's again generational. When you're in the technology generation, when you grew up in that generation, and knowing, again, how to use computers, and the computers are telling you what to do and showing you what to do. It's never, our youth today have problems with problem solving, being able to understand, again, how to build relationships.
Do you think it's a lack of communication?
That's it. It's a lot of lack of, you don't have to talk to anyone anymore. No. I can text you. I don't know how to make friends. I don't know how to engage. I don't know how to interact with other individuals in my age group because all of that's taken out. Now I have this computer that's showing me life, that's doing life alongside of me.
Right. If I sit and play a video game all day long, that kind of troubles me during the summertime when I don't see children out playing anymore. They're all in the house playing video games, and I realize, I grew up, as much as I'm in denial about what my age is, fact of the matter is that I grew up during the 60s and 70s when in the summertime we were outside all day, every day. And now you very rarely see, and we were interacting with one another. Before I ask my next question, I'm just curious because something that you said when you were speaking with Todd. So, do you consider parents who spank children and children that are being spanked, do you consider that traumatizing to them?
It can be. Absolutely, I do.
That's
It's because it's an act, right? So if you know, and you got just paying attention, just thinking about it. If a child is spanked, there are a lot of children who come into spaces and when you go to point or do something, they're jumping. That comes from something. They may be afraid of that they're going to get whipped with a belt or hit with their hand.
Yeah, so
I definitely agree that that type of it's physical abuse is what it is. You know, and you know people say, well, there's a line between abuse and spanking. It's all being hit. You're being hit no matter how it's going. You're being hit, and that can be considered a trauma.
Okay, I will agree with you that putting hands on an adult putting hands on a child is abusive. But I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree about the spanking part. Using myself as an example, I never thought, and no one that I grew up around, and my relatives and peers, never looked at us being spanked. We weren't traumatized by it. I know I can speak personally for it. I was traumatized. It just, what it did for me is it showed me that, you know, this is not a type of behavior that is acceptable. And I never looked at myself being abused, or I would never was traumatized or anything of that nature. So I don't look at it that way. We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to the right side. State your name, caller, and where you're calling from.
Sean Quarles, Cleveland, Ohio.
Hello, Sean. What's on your mind? We have in studio with us Richanda Jackson Birks from 2 Biosphere.
I was calling to support my sister, tell her I'm so proud of her and I love her so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's all I was calling.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your call.
No problem.
And Jeff, I totally can understand from your generation and where you come from. You didn't look at it as really abuse. You looked at it as correction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and again, that comes from this is what you did. This is what your generation of parents did. This is what our generation of parents did. However, it can, again, remember I said trauma it's a perspective thing. So a trauma to you may not be a trauma to me. Okay. Every trauma to each individual is totally different based on how they viewed it and their perception of it. So again, this is when you say you can disagree, it's because you didn't view it that way. But then someone else who was in your generation may have.
Absolutely, because it could have been utilized in the wrong way.
Yeah. So like I said, abuse is one thing. Correction is something different to me. Now you wrote a book, and welcome to the right side, caller. State your name and where you're calling from.
I did have one more question. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead, Todd. Yes.
Okay. So you recognize, you take the time, you've gone through the steps to recognize it's a generational issue that's causing the trauma. And the person that you're working with has recognized that it was generational trauma. Okay? People sometimes embrace their trauma. Mm-hmm. They use it for productive purposes. What do you do then?
Explain productive. Give me an example.
They develop I'll use something I brought up already. They develop a distrust for white people in general. Okay? Now that's unjust to have a general distrust for white people, mm-hmm. but it's a result of generational trauma from, okay? Mm-hmm. And their distrust is not to the point where they're mean to white people. Their distrust is to the point where they handle them with more caution than they would anybody else in order to move forward in any engagement with them.
Well, that's go ahead.
But in the event that they come across some of those white people that are not trustworthy, it causes a reaction that wasn't caused as a result of them dealing with people that are trustworthy, but they're still treating with caution because of their trauma. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with somebody in that situation?
Is that a color issue or is that a trust issue? We have to call it what it is.
Well, I'm sure it's from person to person, but the people that I know that had that issue, it tends to be a trust of color issue.
It's a trust issue, period.
Period.
Anybody who has been traumatized have trust issues, especially if it's unaddressed. You don't trust, period. It has nothing to do with the color of a person's skin. It's the word trust, and it's what trust stands for. Because when you've been traumatized, it's broken.
It's based on a generational trauma that occurred from somebody else in your bloodline.
And that's one of the effects of trauma.
I know people that had that issue to the point where if they know that you have a white parent, they may have trusted you completely up until they find that out, and then it does something to them. Mm-hmm. So they're using it sometimes to work with them and caution, but they're not treating other people that are different color the same way.
It's counterproductive.
How do you deal with that?
It's counterproductive. First of all, we have to understand what trust looks like and what trust means for you. And again, not putting everybody in the same box because of something you experienced from another person. And once we get down to yes, once we get down to that issue, because when they experience it, they're going to talk about it, right? And I said trauma doesn't have to mean you experienced it firsthand. You can know about it. We all knew about 9/11, and some of us are still traumatized by that. Some of us weren't even there, but because we know about it, it affected us in a way. So yeah.
All right, yeah, that's good enough for me.
All right.
I'll go back to listen.
Make sure. I'm gonna make sure you give me a call so we can talk a little bit more, because I think you have some things that I can hear in your voice that you have some things you really want to flesh out. Yeah. And that's okay.
I really don't.
Okay.
No, I really don't.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm just you're interesting guest who's referencing a topic that I think is interesting. So okay. Now I don't have those issues.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that you don't. I thank you for calling.
Yeah, thanks.
Just to tell you, I'm just a curious dude.
Yeah, he is. Thanks again, Todd.
All right.
So, Richanda, you wrote a book called No Place Like Home.
There's No Place Like Home.
There's No Place Like Home. What inspired that book, and what is it about?
So that book is actually a non-fiction novel book, and it journeys through a young woman and her trauma and the adversities that she experienced, which caused her to, which determined how she views the world and other people. So it's just a journey from the age of 3 to 17, and it's actually the first of a trilogy. So that's the first part of the book, and the second book is being worked on.
And was there inspiration behind this book, or you just took it from your work and your interest in this field and developed the book that way?
It was a combination of myself, my work, and just what I know in general about trauma.
And how can is this in bookstores? Do you have to go online to get it? Is it ready for publishing and sale now?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it at Barnes & Noble, and you can also order it on Walmart, and also on my website.
Okay, and we're going to give you a chance to give your website in just a moment. Last question, because we're almost out of time here. So, what role, if any, does your spiritual background play in helping people deal with the trauma that they're dealing with?
The role that my spiritual background plays is everything. I didn't get professional counseling for the things that I went through. I turned to God. I turned to my spirituality. And I had to learn, first thing I had to learn is what love looked like. Because trauma actually taints your image of what love is. And so going to my God, he showed me what love really looks like. And it wasn't those things that I was doing that was love. It wasn't those things that I was allowing into my life. That was not love. I had to really dive in and understand what love looked like, and then begin to love myself. Because trauma takes from you, it doesn't give anything to you. And one thing it takes is your trust, as we were talking to Todd earlier. It takes your trust and it takes your identity. You don't know who you are.
Very quickly, what is T Talks in 30 seconds?
So T Talks is trauma education and advocacy. It's a podcast that I have. I also have a support group. I also do Facebook Lives every Wednesday at 7 p.m. So it basically stands for trauma education and advocacy. And the way that it came about is because I love tea. Literally, I love tea, hot tea. I drink tea 365 days a year with lemon and honey. And God woke me up and gave me that acronym for something that I love. So I thought it was just brilliant.
Well, you have a kindred spirit in loving tea, that is. And so where should put your social information out there, your website, how people can get to your website, if you have an Instagram or Twitter handle, whatever, if you can share that with our audience.
So my website address is www.20biosphere20.org. I also, my Instagram handle is teacher74. I also have Facebook. You can reach me at Richanda Birks or to Biosphere Incorporated, putting the pieces together. I also have a TikTok, which is teacher as well. And my email address is 19, biosphere@gmail.com. So you can reach me there.
And there you have it. And if you like what you heard today, tune in on this coming Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. because Miss Jackson Birks will be back on the station again on the Body Talk show hosted by Al Bridges. So we'll be looking forward to that. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, then please tune in on Tuesday. And if there's something you missed today, I'm sure you can get those social media addresses again and get further information from her on this Tuesday right here on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. And thank you again for being a guest on here today. We really appreciate it. That concludes our Women's History Month. We had a great guest, outstanding guests throughout the month in various walks of life, and all of them just brought it in their various ways. We're going to close the day as we normally do each week with our hero and our zero of the week. Our hero of the week is Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. If you've been paying any attention to the news, you know who he is, but Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and just putting this out here for information, not highlighting it, but saying it is a African American man, a brilliant man, went to Harvard Law School, was at one of the top of his class, and was destined for leadership. And he is the district attorney that is looking into and possibly bringing the indictment on Donald Trump regarding the whole Stormy Daniels situation. And that's not why I'm highlighting him. I'm highlighting him because it took courage for him to do what he is doing, knowing how the former president and his followers are. He literally put his life on the line there. So he is our hero of the week. Our zero of the week is the Republican Party of the state of Michigan. And here's why they are our zero of the week. The state legislature in the state of Michigan proposed minimal gun control laws. One will be extending background checks. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the other was. It's very minimal type of gun control. Of which, by the way, polls in the state of Michigan show that 93% of the people support. The Republican Party in the state of Michigan decided to take a picture from the Holocaust. Picture of a pile of gold rings and gold teeth and what have you, just a humongous pile that the Nazis extracted from their Jewish victims at Auschwitz death camp to melt down into gold so that they could basically have it for their own use. This came from the victims of people who died in the ovens and in the gas chambers. Well, the Michigan Republican Party decided to take that picture and put a caption saying, first they came for their guns, and now they're coming from you. In other words, they invoked images of the Holocaust to speak against very sensible type of gun legislation. Now you can oppose it, all right? That's not why I'm coming at them like this. But the reason that you're the zero, you took an image like this from a death camp, comparing a proposed gun legislation to mass murder. So that's why you are the zero of the week. And then to top it off, when they were exposed by the news media, they didn't take it down from their posts. They stood by it. So you are our zero of the week. You've been listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we show them bring the noise. We come at you every Saturday from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on the greatest station in the nation, from the greatest station in the location in the nation. That's No Static Radio. But right now, I see that my time is up. Thank you very much for your time. Until the next time, shalom.
He do. Right, come on, I don't go through none of that. You a lie. We'd like to thank you for tuning in to The Right Side with your host, Jeff Doggett, here on the station where we don't bring no static, but we sure don't bring the noise on staticradio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media, where we absolutely love to hear from you on Facebook.com/No Static Radio LLC, on Twitter at No Static_Radio, on Instagram at @TheReal_No Static Radio, and on YouTube at No Static Radio. Also, if you guys would like to listen to replays of this show and others on NoStaticRadio.net, please make sure you check us out on Mixler and Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio in the toolbar for replays of this show and others. And for continuous streaming, you could also check us out on TuneIn.com, LiveOnlineRadio.net, or MediaQ for continuous streaming uninterrupted of this show and all others on the platform. And for all things No Static Radio, including up and coming events, merchandise, and an in-depth look at all our great show hosts here, please check out our website at www.nostaticradio.net. Thank you guys for tuning in on this sensational Saturday. And you know what it is. We've got more music for your listening pleasure here on your Voice of the Revolution. NoStaticRadio.net, powered by Google, partner with Colors, and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines and Hot Girls Beer. You guys be safe. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch you on Monday. Peace.